Money always leaves a trail. That's what Detective Lamar Johnson believed until the Green case landed on his desk. A case that would teach him that some trails are meant to mislead, and the clearest paths often lead to the darkest places. The first red flag wasn't the missing man, or even the lake where he'd vanished. It was his wife's perfume, Chanel No. 5, too elegant for a woman reporting her husband missing, too perfect for a woman in distress. Like everything else about Jana Green, it was a carefully calculated performance. Johnson just didn't know it yet. In the years since joining Atlanta Homicide, he'd developed a sixth sense for lies. Tonight, as the autumn rain painted his office window with pale streaks, that sense was screaming. $3 million had disappeared along with Malik Green. But as Johnson would soon discover, the money was just the beginning of what had vanished into the Georgia night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor of Interview Room B. Detective Lamar Johnson studied Jana Green through the two-way mirror before entering. Her posture was too straight, her designer dress too pressed for someone whose husband had vanished 12 hours ago. The metal door creaked as Johnson stepped inside, his coffee cup leaving a dark ring on the steel table. The room reeked of institutional cleaner and expensive perfume, an odd combination that made his nose twitch. He settled into the chair across from her, noting how she tracked his movement with eyes that seemed more calculating than grieving. "Walk me through it again, Mrs. Green, from the beginning." His voice was gentle, inviting confidence, but Jani's perfectly manicured nails merely tapped a steady rhythm on the table. Tap, tap, pause, tap, like Morse code signaling something he couldn't quite decode. "We arrived at Lake Lanier around 8, she began, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Our anniversary tradition. 5 years now. Malik wanted to walk by the water, said the night air would do us good." She paused to adjust her Cartier watch, her eyes following the movement, avoiding his gaze. He saw something in the trees, said he'd be right back, just 5 minutes. Her voice trailed off, too controlled to be genuine grief. "And you didn't follow?" Johnson leaned forward slightly, watching her face for the micro-expressions that often betrayed liars. "He told me to stay on the path." Her response came with practiced precision. "I always do what my husband tells me." The last sentence hung in the air like cigarette smoke, and Johnson's gut tightened. 15 years of detective work had taught him one thing. When a story sounded too clean, it usually meant someone had spent time polishing it. The velvet room in Buckhead wore its elegance like armor, all dark wood and leather, where Atlanta's elite came to pretend they weren't making deals that would ruin lives. Johnson sat at the bar where Malik Green had been a regular, watching the bartender polish glasses with mechanical precision. "Yeah, I remember Malik," Marcus Cole said, setting aside a crystal tumbler. "Always ordered Macallan 25 neat, but the last few months he'd barely touch it. Just sat there, watching the door like he was expecting the devil himself to walk in." The bartender's eyes darted to the corner booth, now empty. "That's where they'd meet. 3-piece suits, briefcases handcuffed to wrists. Real dramatic stuff." Johnson's next stop was Malik's office at Green Financial Solutions, 20 stories above Peachtree Street. The place screamed success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art that probably cost more than Johnson's annual salary. But it was the details that caught his eye. 2 coffee cups on the desk, 2 separate phone chargers, a man living 2 lives. The office manager, a thin woman named Patricia, hovered in the doorway. "He'd come in at odd hours," she offered without being asked. "Sometimes I'd arrive early, find him still here from the night before. Those nights, there was always a black SUV in the parking lot. Same car, different drivers." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous tell. "Last time I saw him, he was shredding documents, kept muttering something about checkmate. I thought it was strange. Malik hated chess." Johnson pulled open a desk drawer, found a framed photo of Jana and Malik at their wedding. They were smiling, champagne glasses raised. But Malik's eyes were focused on something off camera. His expression tight. Already running, even then. The photo negative of Malik Green was emerging. Not just a successful investment consultant, but a man neck deep in something dark enough to make him disappear into the Georgia night, leaving behind a wife who didn't seem to miss him much at all. Marcus Rivera's office suite occupied the top floor of Atlanta's newest glass tower, the kind of place where the carpet swallowed footsteps and the air tasted filtered and expensive. Johnson waited in a chair worth more than his monthly mortgage, while Rivera's secretary eyed him with practiced suspicion. Rivera emerged like a shark from deep water, smooth, purposeful, dangerous. His handshake was firm, but his smile never reached his eyes. "Detective Johnson, I've been expecting you. Tragic business about Malik." He gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Atlanta sprawled below them like a circuit board, alive with electric veins. "You were seen with him," Johnson said, watching Rivera's reflection in the glass. "Multiple times in the weeks before he vanished. Care to explain?" "Business associates cross paths. Atlanta's financial circle is small." Rivera adjusted his French cuffs, platinum links glinting. "But I suspect you already know that." The conversation was interrupted by a knock. FBI agent Sarah Chen entered without waiting for a response, her badge already out. Rivera's composed expression flickered for just a moment, a crack in perfect marble. "Interesting timing," Chen said, laying photographs across Rivera's immaculate desk. "3 of your other associates have vanished in the past 18 months, all after large financial transfers, all near bodies of water." She tapped one photo. "Thomas Reed, Lake Oconee; James Martinez, Lake Hartwell; now Malik Green, Lake Lanier." Johnson watched Rivera's hands, noticed how they remained perfectly still. Not the nervousness of guilt, the stillness of a predator. "Coincidences," Rivera said softly, "like the coincidence of an FBI agent and a homicide detective arriving together. Unless—" His smile returned, sharper now. "This isn't about Malik at all, is it?" The skyline behind him had darkened, the city's lights coming alive like stars. Somewhere in those lights was the truth about Malik Green. But looking at Rivera's calculating expression, Johnson realized they were just scratching the surface of something much deeper, much darker than a missing person case. The precinct was quiet at midnight, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant chirp of a police radio. Johnson spread financial records across his desk like a fortune teller, laying out cards, each statement telling a piece of a story he couldn't quite grasp. $3 million had moved through 7 accounts in the week before Malik disappeared. Each transfer clean, precise, professional. Too professional. Rosa Martinez shuffled into his office, still wearing her cleaning uniform from Green Financial Solutions. Her weathered hands clutched a plastic bag. "I find these, detective, in Senor Green's trash." She emptied the bag onto his desk. Torn fragments of paper, some barely larger than confetti. He always careful with papers, always used shredder, but that night he tear these by hand, nervous hands. Johnson nodded, watching as she arranged the pieces with surprising dexterity. "You put any of it together?" "Some." She pointed to a partially reconstructed diagram. "This word keeps showing up." Her finger rested on a single word. "Checkmate." Hours passed as Johnson pieced together the puzzle. The diagram took shape, a complex web of arrows and numbers, companies nested within companies like Russian dolls. At its center, a series of transactions, all pointing toward an account in the Cayman Islands, the same account where Jana Green had transferred a significant sum 3 days after reporting Malik missing. His phone buzzed, a text from Chen. "Rivera's financials just came in. You need to see this." The timestamp on the message read 3:47 a.m., but Johnson barely noticed. He was too focused on a pattern emerging from the chaos of numbers and names. It wasn't just money laundering. It was something bigger, something that had made Malik Green valuable enough to keep alive, but dangerous enough to remove from the board. Like a game of chess where every piece was in position, waiting for the final move. Lake Lanier's mist clung to Johnson's coat as he approached Malik's cabin, the gravel crunching beneath his feet like broken promises. The key from evidence turned smoothly in the lock, too smoothly for a place supposedly unused for months. Someone had been here recently, keeping the mechanisms oiled. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight. The cabin smelled of leather, old wood, and something else, cigarettes. Malik didn't smoke, but Jana's witness statement mentioned nothing about visitors. The living room stood frozen in time, half-empty whiskey glass on the coffee table, Wall Street Journal from 3 weeks ago, reading glasses folded neatly beside them. Johnson's trained eye caught the subtle signs of a hasty exit. Drawer slightly ajar, papers misaligned, a picture frame tilted 2 degrees off-center. In the study, he found the first real prize, a false bottom in the desk drawer, revealed by an almost imperceptible scratch in the wood. Inside lay a stack of letters, their edges worn from frequent handling. The handwriting was urgent, slanting right like it was running from something. One passage jumped out. "They're moving faster than we thought. Rivera's people know about Geneva. Get out now or we're both dead. Remember the Lake House Protocol, M." Another letter, dated just days before Malik's disappearance, made Johnson's pulse quicken. "Jay knows everything. Can't trust her anymore. The accounts were compromised from the start. This was never about money. It was about checkmate. Should have seen it sooner." The final letter was different, written in Malik's own hand, but never sent. "My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, I failed. But don't blame yourself. We both knew the risks when we started this. Just remember, the real evidence isn't in the numbers. It's in what Janae did on our wedding day. The gift she gave me tells the whole story. I'm sorry I couldn't finish what we started." Johnson photographed each letter carefully, his mind racing. Marcus, not Rivera. Another Marcus. The pieces were shifting, revealing new patterns. He'd been looking at the wrong game board entirely. This wasn't about a missing person anymore. This was about a conspiracy that had been years in the making. And somewhere in this web of lies and money sat Jana Green, a black queen positioned for checkmate. The Green Mansion loomed against the stormy afternoon sky, its manicured lawns and perfect symmetry a monument to appearances. Johnson found Jana in her greenhouse, tending to orchids with surgical precision. The humidity made his collar stick as he watched her trim dead leaves with golden scissors, each snip echoing like tiny gunshots. "Those letters in the cabin make for interesting reading, Mrs. Green." Johnson studied her hands, looking for a tremor, a pause, any break in her rhythm. Nothing. "Especially the one about your wedding gift to Malik." Snip. Another dead leaf fell. "Did you know orchids can survive almost anything, Detective?" Her voice carried the same practiced calm from their first interview, but something else lurked beneath it now, something almost like amusement. "You can cut them down to nothing and they'll still grow back, as long as the roots are intact." "Like offshore accounts?" Johnson pulled out his phone, displayed the transfer records. $3 million, moved the day after you reported him missing. Your roots run deep, Mrs. Green." She finally turned to face him, her smile sharp as a blade. "You have no idea how deep." She set down the scissors, removed her gardening gloves with deliberate care. "Did you ever ask yourself why Malik chose Lake Lanier? Why that specific spot?" "Why don't you tell me?" "Because 12 years ago, another man disappeared there. Marcus Thomas, my first husband." Her laugh was soft, hollow. "Malik never knew, of course. He was too busy looking at spreadsheets to check marriage records in other states. Too busy playing chess to realize he was just another pawn. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating her face in stark relief. For a moment, Johnson saw what Malik must have seen in his final moments: the calculated pleasure of a predator watching its trap spring shut. "You know what the real irony is, detective?" She picked up a water mister, sprayed her orchids with gentle precision. Malik thought he was so clever with his coded messages and secret files. He never realized that every move he made was exactly what we wanted, right up until checkmate. The implications hit Johnson like a physical blow. We, not I. The game was bigger than he'd imagined, and he was still several moves behind. A storm lashed against the precinct windows as Johnson sat across from Jana in the interrogation room. The same room where this had all started, but now the fluorescent lights revealed every crack in her perfect facade. Her Chanel perfume couldn't mask the scent of defeat. "The anonymous tip came from Marcus Thomas's sister," Johnson said, sliding a photograph across the table. "She's been watching you for years, waiting for you to slip up. 3 men, 3 lakes, 3 insurance policies. But Malik was different, wasn't he? He found out about the others." Janae's composure cracked for the first time, a hairline fracture in porcelain. Marcus was practice. The second husband was necessity. But Malik? Her laugh was bitter as hemlock. Malik was perfect. Ambitious enough to be useful, desperate enough to be manipulated. "Do you know what it's like, detective, to spend 5 years pretending to love someone while watching them dig their own grave?" Thunder rolled outside as Johnson laid out the final pieces. Documents proving her connection to Rivera's empire, offshore accounts tied to both previous husbands' deaths, and the wedding gift, a custom-made chess set with a hollow king piece containing records of all her carefully orchestrated widowhoods. "It was never about the money," Jana said, her voice distant. "That was just keeping score. I wanted to create something beautiful, a perfect sequence of moves that no one would ever trace." Malik almost appreciated it at the end, almost understood the artistry. As Johnson read her rights, she maintained that same eerily calm smile. But when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, something final broke behind her eyes. The queen had fallen, but even in checkmate, she kept her secrets. Lake Lanier would keep them too. Its dark waters holding whatever remained of Malik Green, and the truth he died protecting. 3 husbands, 3 disappearances, 3 perfect crimes. Until a grieving sister and a detective's instincts finally brought down the Black Queen of Atlanta's deadliest chess game.